There are lots of knock-on impacts of what's happening at the moment. Um, I think the difficulty is that the Houthis, they've spent 20 years fighting different factions, different elements within Yemen. They're extremely battle hardened. They're very indifferent to civilian suffering, and they are for the first time now sort of enjoying this regional, if you like, sort of pan-Arab leadership or self-bestowed leadership position. I don't think they're going to back down, and I think the longer term solutions lie in what's happening inside Yemen and who has control of that country.
Arthur Snell is a former British diplomat. He served in Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, and is a former assistant director for counter-terrorism at the Foreign Office. Good evening to you, Arthur.
Good evening.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Let me ask you what you think are the likely consequences in the Middle East of those further strikes by US and UK forces on Houthi targets.
Well, I think in the immediate term, the impact may not be particularly significant. I'm sure the Houthis will be able to continue to strike at shipping, and I expect they will continue to do so. And I expect they will continue to be seen in a lot of the Arab world as at the vanguard of defending sort of Arab pride and defending the Palestinians as well.
Yeah, because the Houthis seem to be reveling in their position of being high profile defenders of the Palestinian cause against the Israeli. They're vowing a very strong response, which will cause huge damage to the US and the UK. I mean, there's no sign that these military strikes are going to cause them to back down.
No, I don't think there is, and there's a context in which, from the perspective of the sort of the man on the Arab street, of course, one shouldn't generalize too much, but that there is no Arab government that is seen as taking on Israel militarily, and effectively that's what the Houthis are doing, and in a way they've sort of awarded themselves this position of a kind of resistance leadership. And not even Hezbollah, which in the past has obviously sort of taken that crown at different times, is doing that. So I think the Houthis are enjoying this sort of leadership role that they've bestowed upon themselves.
What about the risks of escalation, of British forces being drawn into the wider conflict?
Well, actually, I think that risk is pretty low. I cannot see any circumstances or any very realistic circumstances in which our American allies or Britain itself would seek to get more heavily involved. The idea of sort of boots on the ground in Yemen, I think, is really not on the cards at all. Now, we have the problem that the Houthis have shown already, because of course they toughed out a multi-year onslaught from Saudi Arabia. They've shown already that they can weather quite significant airstrikes and carry on doing what they're doing. They're not at all worried about the prospect of civilian casualties. So we have a problem that our strategy may not yield immediate results, but I don't think that would mean that our leaders would seek to escalate in that direction.
You say it may not lead to immediate results. I mean, it is an isometric conflict, isn't it? Because we're hearing that many of the missiles that are used in these US and UK missions cost a huge amount of money. The Houthis only have to put up a few fairly cheap drones, and any kind of attack, even if it doesn't cause a huge amount of damage, could be enough to force shipping companies to say, well, they're not going to take the risk.
Absolutely, and of course, there's already a lot of shipping has changed its routing, so that's already happening, and there are knock-on effects. Think about the Egyptian economy, very heavily reliant on the revenues of the tolls that you pay as you go through the Suez Canal. So there are lots of knock-on impacts of what's happening at the moment. I think the difficulty is that the Houthis, they've spent 20 years fighting different factions, different elements within Yemen. They're extremely battle hardened. They're very indifferent to civilian suffering, and they are for the first time now sort of enjoying this regional, if you like, sort of pan-Arab leadership or self-bestowed leadership position. I don't think they're going to back down, and I think the longer term solutions lie in what's happening inside Yemen and who has control of that country.
Finally, and just briefly, as you, if you can, even though it's quite a big question, but on the role of Iran, which is backing the Houthi rebels, it's also, of course, backing Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and behind many other conflicts around the globe. Do you think the Iranians are egging the Houthis on? Do you think they're happy with the way that this is unfolding and the effect it is having across the Middle East?
Yeah, I'm sure they're egging them on. I'm sure they are perfectly happy about what's going on. I think where I might differ slightly to Lord Robertson, who was on earlier, is that I don't think the Houthis are acting to orders sent to them from Tehran. I think they're doing their own thing, and they are driven by their own sense of their own sort of ideology and their own sense of kind of power and influence. But they couldn't do it if they didn't get weapons from Iran. That's absolutely clear. And so Iran definitely has a role to play in all of this story.
Arthur Snell, a former British diplomat with lots of experience right across the Middle East. Really good to get your insight. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.